The next presentation is from Joe Causon. As I said before the break, always a great speaker. Joe is the Chief Executive of the Institute of Customer Service. I always start these presentations from Joe with a feeling of some trepidation, because Joe carries out benchmarking about customer services across a bewildering range of industries. And I hope that Housing isn't doing too badly this time. So look forward to this, Joe.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And really good to be with everyone this morning. And I know you've already had some quite interesting conversations, so I'll hopefully try to add to that. What Alistair's referring to is obviously the UK CSI. Today, actually, the team have asked me to talk a little bit about trust and restoring reputation. I am, however, very happy to touch on anything in the UK CSI, and it may come up in terms of a conversation. We had our own webinar first thing this morning, which was sadly why I couldn't be with you. So really happy to pick up on that. But without further ado, for those of you that maybe don't know the Institute, my mum frequently asks me what I do for a living. So for those of you that don't, here's just a little quick summary of what we are all about. And Alistair made the point around us being pan-sector. I think that is really helpful because mostly customers, tenants, citizens don't compare within sector. They tend to compare against their favourite brands, as we all know. So actually having a pan-sector approach is very, very helpful. And we're very privileged to have that. We have around 400 organisational members and also a significant number of individual members. In terms of the split, 80% of our book comes from the private sector, but we do have actually more than 20% actually that are in the public and third sectors. And for our sins, hopefully it's not for sins, but we are also the, and I'm very proud of this, Secretariat for the All Parliamentary Group on Customer Service. And that group made some really lasting change last year. In the fact that we managed to get a change in the law as a result of the Service with Respect campaign. And I'm back in Parliament this week to talk about that. If you don't know about the Service with Respect campaign, please just give me a quick email afterwards, or John or Hayley or any of the team, because I think it is really important at the moment. We keep talking about building trust, but actually many of your people are in the front line really having some challenging times, and anybody should be able to go about their job without fear or concern as far as we're concerned. And that's what the campaign's all about. So Service with Respect, do go and have a little kind of nod or come back to me. Here's some of our members inside the sector, just so that you can see that. And thank you to anybody on this call today that is a member. I know that is a pretty challenging landscape that we are operating in. So what I'm going to try and do is give you reasons to believe, because I think this is quite important. Most of you will already know some of these, but I just think as a bit of context, really understanding why the service agenda is so important and that critical link to trust. I love stats, so let me just share a couple of those with you. Over 60% of our workforce are in some form of customer-related role. So this matters to us as individuals, to us as customers, to us as colleagues and employees, to us as businesses, and also to the UK in terms of the overall performance of the UK. And actually, just a kind of a reminder, there is a clear correlation, and all of our research shows this at the Institute, between those organisations that outperform over a longer period of time and with their customer satisfaction, who are above average in their own sectors. They'll outperform in terms of profitability, they'll outperform in terms of productivity, employee engagement, etc. So there's a clear message really around what we're seeing. And also that 94%, which I'll just show you on the bottom, about the link between trust and the customer service of an organisation really helps to drive trust. Of the 26 metrics in the UK CSI, the closest correlation between customer satisfaction is the one around trust. So this is how we use service to improve our trust is very, very clear. Okay, backdrop of the world we're living in. I'm sure you talked about some of this morning already. But we're definitely seeing a real challenge around greater polarisation between those that can and those that cannot. And I suspect that many of your customers are pretty challenged at the moment, which is challenging for you in terms of how we actually deliver against that. Much greater focus on well-being. And interestingly, in the latest UK CSI, we've seen an increase, quite a significant increase in those that are experiencing financial challenges. So back in January, it was around 12%. It's now moved to 18%. which is quite a significant shift. And how we manage that and deal with that is clearly quite a big issue. We're having more problems and complaints than we ever had, and we're less satisfied. And I hate to say this, but the overall UK CSI is showing that actually our customer satisfaction is at its poorest rate since 2015. So we're seeing a significant fall in customer satisfaction levels across all industry sectors. The only sector that we're seeing some levels of improvement in is in the leisure and tourism sector, which I think is quite interesting. So there are some real challenges. The whole ESG agenda has certainly taken root and has grown. There's been lots around E, quite a bit around S, less around the G, so how well governed our organisations are. And we're doing a big piece of research at that at the moment at the Institute. And again, if you want to know more, we're launching that at the end of July. So about looking at the governance of organisations. Pretty much every organisation I'm talking to has retention and recruitment issues. Possibly not as bad as it was, but still some real pressure on that and real pressure on costs. You know, we saw this morning wage inflation continuing to outstrip, and some real challenges around supply chain issues. So the environment that we are all facing in, whatever industry sector you are in, is pretty challenging. And the balance between getting the human and the digital experience is probably one of the things that I'm asked most about, and the advent of AI and where is that driving us. And that has quite an interesting link to the whole trust agenda. Now, what I would say, and the UK CSI again shows this very clearly, you've got to be doing well in terms of your what I call transactional or hygiene factors in terms of the service experience. How fast I answer the phone, how good is my website navigation, are my people well trained, are they demonstrating a connection, the complaints process, how easy, you know, the product service experience. But interestingly, the ethics of an organization, the customer ethos of the organization, do I believe that this organization is doing the right thing? Those have significantly accelerated. And in a world where we're trusting less and we're more confused, outreach is really, really important. So from a customer viewpoint, being really there for your customers and being transparent and maintaining that customer trust has become, I think, one of the key drivers. Now, we did some research about 18 months ago looking at the dimensions of trust, which you can see in the wheel on the right-hand side. And I'm going to talk briefly through some of those elements. But, you know, I guess this is to try and give some comfort around why the customer service agenda is really important, because 41% of customers strongly agree that customer service, so the actual art of customer service and delivering brilliant customer service, significantly influences their trust in an organization. So dialing up your service will help absolutely to dial up your trust levels. Reputation for customer satisfaction, well-trained staff, the quality of the experience are definitely the biggest drivers of trust. So even in a digitally enabled world, the human matters significantly. I know you already know this, but really thinking about how they show up, what they're doing and how they're seen is increasingly important. And the organization being seen to do the right thing, which links back to the governance point. You know, in terms of its business practice, who it's there to serve, its relevance, what it is doing. And there's a strongest correlation, as I've said, to the contribution of trust between that answer. So your business practicing. Things that break trust and are things like hidden fees or costs, clearly things like product defects, manipulation of online reviews, or charging different price points. All of those sorts of things really have quite a negative impact actually on whether I trust an organisation. Some of those will be relevant for the sector, some less so. But it is quite important when you're thinking about communicating your service charges, any changes in those, supply chain issues, all of those things will matter. And the three things that actually drive greater trust is transparency, addressing the needs of vulnerable customers. I think it's quite interesting when we ask customers about some of their activities, you know, they are concerned about how those that are less able to look after themselves are being treated. So there's definitely a clear correlation with that. And then this integration between the human and the digital experience. So I promised to pull out those 7 dimensions in the model. So customer ethos. This is the sense that you genuinely care about me as an organization, and the decisions you are making have me in your mind. So this isn't doing everything that the customer wants, but it is about living on and delivering on those promises and the value propositions that you are saying. Competence, quality of that product service experience, the people, the end-to-end delivery, and those underpinning capabilities, not passing me from pillar to post. If I look at the latest data on the complaints handling for the UK CSI, some of the stuff that actually is going awry isn't just about timeframes, how long you're taking to get back to an organisation. It's about whether your people appear to care. And actually that has got worse, quite a lot worse, because they're under pressure. So thinking about how we are really training for that, dealing with that is going to be an increasingly important point. Reliability and dependency, the service promise, how often is that broken? The accessibility and the desire for getting things right, enabling easy access, outreach. I think this sector did really, really well in COVID because it worked really hard on outreach and the service culture that it was looking to drive. I think there's some really interesting things there about reviewing that. Transparency and honesty. And particularly around how we're using data. And I worry a little bit that there's going to be some big challenges around that, particularly as we deploy more AI. And trust, there's a clear correlation between we'll give an organization our data. We will share that more frequently if we trust the organization and if we're clear with what you're going to be doing with our data. Ethics, so the ethics of an organization, both treating customers and suppliers and employees fairly. Making a positive contribution to society. And given what this sector does, we should be able to really score highly here about really focusing on purpose and how you're delivering the purpose of your organizations. Listening to and understanding the specific needs and trying to make that much more personalized. That does not mean giving an absolute personalized service to every single customer, but it does mean about really listening hard to what are those particular issues or challenges that they have and addressing those or meeting those, leaning into those issues. And then also the brand validation. This is for me about what others are saying about you. So feedback from an organization, reviews, mainstream media, and that is really important peer-to-peer feedback in terms of doing those aspects. I've already mentioned the correlation, but a few more stats for you, because I think what's important here is the 9 and 10s. So when we're getting much higher levels of customer satisfaction, or sorry, trust scores, then you're going to get a much higher level of likelihood to remain. Now, obviously in this sector, it's not so relevant in terms of likelihood to remain, but it does also play across to reputation, and it also plays across to my sense of actually this organization caring deeply about me as an individual. Doing the right things in business practice. So the sorts of things which really are up here is about being open and transparent, make me feel reassured, keeping your promises, cares, really cares. Those are key drivers in terms of that link with the overall customer satisfaction and the link with the trust levels. And the most important things that are really important from a trust angle, the customer satisfaction and reputation of the organization. So, your reviews, what other people are saying about you. The fact that staff are well trained, they treat me as an individual, communication in a clear and straightforward language, putting the needs of customers first, as you can see in terms of running. And much of this is about that personal relationship, much more around the empathy, the human aspects of a business. And there clearly is a huge correlation between that in a world which is becoming more alienated, more extreme, and more removed. So I've talked about some of these things around hidden costs, and I've talked about leading of trust breakers. So product defects, as we've talked about, organizations manipulating customer reviews, high pressure sales tactics, all of those things are certainly reducing trust in an organization. What builds trust, which is the most important thing, being really crystal clear about the purpose of your organization and communicating that in a way that actually me as a customer really cares about. So that link to what you're there to do for your customer set. And one of the things I've been working around a lot is around governance and trying to get that much more in balance. So the balance of all of the stakeholders, which I think is really important. Framework for the organisation's competence, dependability, transparency. Attitudes to the service culture in the organisation and how that's run from the very top of the organisation, and the impact that you're having in the wider sphere. One of the things that I think is quite interesting that again has come out of the UK CSI is the importance of localness and that whole kind of sense of community. And I think the sector really, really can build on that. In terms of being able to really drive that sense of being part of not just your customers' lives, but the wider community, and really building that brand reputation and really building that sense of the fact that you care about the wider sense. In terms of business performance, what we can see here is there's a real correlation, I've already mentioned this, between customer satisfaction measures and I trust an organisation, they make me feel reassured, the reputation of the organisation. And then as you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, customers say it's very important that they trust the customer service in an organisation they're dealing with, 94%. Customers agree that high level of trust makes the experience of dealing with the organisation better, 67%, and 41% see that the customer service significantly impacts the overall trust score. So in terms of the benefits, I think some of these are probably quite obvious, so I'm not going to spend hours on this, but lower cost to serve. You know, one of the issues we've got at the moment is the cost to serve is huge. And if I look at the latest UK CSI, about 20% of our time is dealing with problems and issues. So when you look at that as a productivity issue, that's around about £9 billion every month that we are spending on trying to resolve issues and problems. So, you know, really dialing up that service experience and really dialing up will really help to dial up the trust experience. Customer loyalty and advocacy, supplier relationships, much more about those longer term supplier relationships, and really understanding the end-to-end customer journey as you navigate through that. This point about reservoir of goodwill, this is something that I'm really interested in at the moment, because I think this was quite strong, but I think in today's environment at the moment, I think there's definitely a sense that consumers and customers and tenants are becoming less willing to trust and have less reservoir of goodwill. So it used to be a stage that if I got something wrong, if I had a very strong brand with an organisation, I might forgive. I think we're less forgiving, which I think is an ongoing issue. So customers are definitely less, you know, forgiving of those mistakes. But where you have built longer term, more relevant and closer relationships, that really does help. Employee engagement, you know, definitely we're seeing you know, a much greater sense, and you will know from all the data that we talk at the Institute, the close correlation between employee engagement, customer satisfaction, and business performance, and of course credibility with stakeholders. And then looking at how important, now this is obviously across the wider sectors. So we're looking at how trust is really important, but I thought it was quite interesting to see how and where the housing associations sit as part of this. So you might argue that, you know, clearly for your bank or central government or insurance, that, you know, trust is particularly important. But if you look at the housing association, look at those numbers, you know, very important and important, quite significant, over, you know, nearly 90% are saying that that is going to be really important to them. So there's a real correlation around the importance of trust. Okay, I'm going to move on. And then thinking about, you know, who we trust as well, in terms of recommendations and other people we might trust. So friends and family right up there. So this is about the recommendation, what we're saying to each other. But also online review sites in terms of our level, independent third-party sites, regulators and ombudsman. So you can see where we're going for our information about who we trust and what are the most reliable sources and around that as we go forward, and how we've dealt with those. So maybe not some surprises around that, but friends and family have a huge impact, you know, 40%, which is quite significant. And then looking at different channels, yeah, in terms of who I might trust through this. So in person always scores well. Apps do very well. I think the thing that we trust least is probably chat bots in terms of our experience, and it does depend on what we are doing in terms of of that overall experience about which channels we will trust most. But those that are reducing customer effort by processing routine transactions quickly, very happy to use tech in order to help us with that. Personalized and experienced offers, so something that is much more around talking to me as an individual and personal, again, very happy with that. But making sure that things are transparent, orders, repairs, speed, efficiency, all of that, the tech actually should be taking that strain. Video consultations, really positively received, or demonstrations, virtual tours, all of those things. But when empathy is really needed, when there is a real personal issue, when there are financial considerations, or when I have a complaint that I am very concerned about or fearful over, then in person is really, really critical to build that level of trust and to keep those access. Now, again, I talk about this quite a lot, but around, for me, in a world where I think most organizations are pretty challenged at the moment, certainly, as I've said, seeing that not just in terms of their customer satisfaction, but the amount of things that we are trying to deliver. And I think it is really challenging. And, in terms of the recruitment issues that we have, supply chain issues, regulatory issues, all of these things. And what I would try to make sure that we're doing is, obviously, we have to achieve what I would call those tactical aspects in terms of complaint management, making sure repairs are done on time, responding efficiently and effectively. But I would also really try to encourage us to keep a real focus on purpose, relevance and impact. Because the more that we can drive that inside our organizations, the more that we drive a service culture and this sense of being connected to the purpose of our organizations, the more effective we are going to be. So 3 really simple boxes for me, or circles for me. Purpose, who do we serve and what drives us? Relevance, who would miss us if we weren't here? And what is the legacy that we are looking to leave in our organizations? We measure a lot of activity. I'm not sure that we definitely always measure the impact that we're looking to leave. And there's a clear correlation with that. Emma, I've just seen your point, which I would agree wholeheartedly with. So Emma's on the chat has said so many interesting links to professionalization issue. Absolutely. If the sector gets professionalization right, it's not just about getting a qualification. Many of these trust factors will be in place. And I think professionalization in the wider sense, but also professionalization in service. And again, the Institute's done quite a lot of research around this and about attracting and retaining the right people inside our organizations to drive a service culture is increasingly important. So I think, and I'm hoping that I'm good with time. I think I'm broadly, but I hope people found that interesting, and I'm really happy to take any questions at all.
Yeah, did a great job there, Joe. Any more questions apart from the Emma one that you handled? Any thoughts from anyone? Shall I maybe ask one to get the ball rolling then? I mean, Joe, you work across a wide variety of industries. Some are regulated, some aren't regulated. Big questions about the role of the regulator and Ofsted at the moment. Just Housing's about to intensify regulation. Just any thoughts or reflections on what would work and what traps to avoid?
Okay, yeah, really good point. And it's interesting, we also ask in the UK CSI consumers and customers about what they want to see. And in a world where we're more concerned, there is a definite drive, shall we say, from consumers for greater regulation. Yeah. So I think we have to recognise the environment we are in. In terms of bear traps around regulation, my personal view is, and we work with the many of those regulators, is to try and get the regulator to think about the service culture. This isn't just about, for me, it certainly shouldn't be about league tables. It should be about really trying to drive the right service culture in an organisation and rewarding, so incentivising for the right service culture. Now, we have to measure that, which is why I would always say something like looking outside a sector is really important too. So benchmarking outside of your sector, which is why the UK CSI is really helpful for that. But I think you've got to be regulating for, but even, actually as organizations, wouldn't it be good if we're driving these things and actually you almost want to have a situation where the regulator from a service point of view becomes less important because you're doing it, for all the reasons that we're kind of talking about. But we also understand that the regulation has a critical part to play for those that cannot and need support. So I would encourage us to think about our service culture. I would encourage us to benchmark outside of sector. I'd encourage us to think about how we incentivize our leadership teams around service and our front line around service. And I'd encourage us to think about the whole end-to-end customer journey and talk to the regulator about your service culture, because that for me is going to be the future, Alistair.
Good stuff.